Hey there, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Really good to have you with us. Today, we're diving into something quite specific, but, well, incredibly important in UK law: religiously aggravated offenses. We've got some source material. We've been looking through research articles, that sort of thing, to really get a handle on what these laws actually mean. Our mission basically to unpack the sensitive area, make it clear, and do it pretty quickly. And joining me to guide us through this is our expert. Our sources highlight their background as a senior lecturer in criminal law and criminology, with a real focus on hate crime and that tricky balance with freedom of expression.
Thanks. It's definitely a critical area, both legally and socially. Happy to explore it with you.
Great. Okay, let's just jump straight in then. When the law mentions a religiously aggravated offense here in the UK, what are we actually talking about? How does that extra layer get defined?
Right. So think of it maybe like this. You start with a standard crime, could be assault, criminal damage, maybe a public order offense, something like that. But then that crime gets this kind of legal multiplier almost applied if there's a specific religious hostility element involved. The law, primarily in the Crime and Disorder Act 1998, with later changes, adds this layer when the offense is motivated wholly or even just partly by hostility towards someone's religion. Or, and this is important, if the offender demonstrates that hostility while they're actually committing the act. It's really about the attack having that specific targeted hate behind it or shown within it.
Okay, so it's not only the basic crime itself, but the reason behind it, or maybe the way it's carried out. That's what escalates it legally.
Exactly. That's the core idea. It's seen as an attack, not just on, say, a person or their property, but, implicitly on their identity, their religious identity. And what's really crucial, perhaps a bit surprising, is that the law doesn't only look at whether someone sort of hated the religion beforehand, like a pre-existing motive. It also captures hostility that's shown during the act. So shouting religious slurs, using hateful symbols right then and there, that can make it an aggravated offense. Even if proving a deep-seated, pre-planned motive might be, well, more difficult, it's about the impact of that hostility in that moment.
That difference between motivation or demonstration, that's really quite interesting. So how does the prosecution actually go about proving that element in court? What's the test they use?
Well, essentially, the prosecution has two potential routes, and either one is enough. They can bring evidence to show the offense was motivated, again, wholly or partly, by religious hostility. Or, alternatively, they can show that the offender demonstrated that hostility during the offense or immediately before or after it happened. That demonstrated path is often, practically speaking, a bit easier to prove, sometimes like those slurs you mentioned. It's about making that link, criminal act connected to religious hostility.
Right. Can you give us maybe a concrete example just to see how this works in practice? What kind of cases actually get classified like this?
Yeah, sure. Our sources mentioned a couple of clear examples. One was a case in Leeds, I think. A man was convicted for a racially and religiously aggravated assault. He'd attacked a taxi driver, shouting anti-Muslim abuse. That aggravation meant a significantly tougher sentence than he would have got just for the assault on its own. Another example flagged up was distributing hateful leaflets, Islamophobic ones, near a mosque. That was prosecuted as a religiously aggravated public order offense. Why? Because it clearly targeted that community based on their faith. So these aren't just acts that are offensive. The law sees them as crimes made worse by that specific religious hostility.
Okay, and this immediately brings up that really complex line, doesn't it? That tension between protecting people from this kind of targeted hostility and, well, protecting freedom of expression.
Absolutely. And this is where it gets incredibly challenging, especially in a diverse multi-faith society like the UK. What's fascinating, really, is exactly that tightrope the law tries to walk. Critics often point out, quite rightly, that robust criticism of religious beliefs or religious practices, that's fundamental free speech. But the question is, where does that criticism cross the line into unlawful hostility directed at people because of their religion? The law is attempting to pinpoint that transition from speech about religion to actions or speech that target people hostility because of their religion. It's a constant point of debate and legal interpretation.
So when someone is found guilty, how does this religious aggravation actually affect their sentence? Is it a major factor?
Oh, it's significant, yes. The religious aggravation is what the law calls a statutory aggravating factor. Now, that's not just a label. It legally requires judges to increase the sentence severity compared to what the base crime on its own would normally attract. The judge actually has to state in open court that the offense was religiously aggravated and explain how that influenced the sentence they decided on. It often means, longer prison terms or tougher community orders. The law explicitly tries to recognize the extra harm caused by being targeted for your identity.
And that harm to the victim. The fact they were attacked because of their faith. The law specifically tries to account for that impact.
Definitely. Victim impact statements often play a really crucial role in these cases. Being targeted for something so central to who you are, like your faith, well, it can cause profound, lasting emotional and psychological harm, far beyond the immediate physical act sometimes. The legal framework does try to recognize this specific vulnerability, this deep harm that comes from identity-based attacks.
Our sources also seem to highlight some concerning trends, particularly increases in religiously aggravated hate crimes against Muslim and Jewish communities, often linked to events happening elsewhere.
Yes, unfortunately, that's what the data, for instance, from the Home Office, tends to show. These offenses aren't always just isolated incidents. They can and do spike during times of, say, heightened social tension or geopolitical events. It reflects how these broader conflicts or issues can sadly translate into targeted hostility on a community level.
Right. So pulling all this together then, what's the main thing we should take away about these laws? What's the core point for us?
I think the key takeaway is that religiously aggravated offenses are specifically about criminal acts that carry that extra damaging element of hostility based on someone's faith. These laws represent a legal response trying to protect individuals and communities from being targeted and harmed because of their religious identity. They aim to provide safety and seek justice by acknowledging the really profound damage these kinds of attacks can cause. And of course, the ongoing challenge for the whole legal system is balancing this vital protection with the equally fundamental right to free expression and criticism.
This has been a really insightful deep dive. Thanks for that. We've unpacked the definition, looked at that legal test, motivation, or demonstration, heard some real-world examples, understood the impact on sentencing, and touched on that very tricky balance with free expression. Understanding these concepts, I think it really helps you navigate the complexities around safety, identity, and law in society today.
And just to reiterate that final point, these laws are fundamentally designed to confront criminal hostility aimed at someone's core identity. They strive for safety and justice, particularly for vulnerable communities in our diverse society.
Which kind of leaves us all with this thought to maybe mull over. In a world where both religious criticism and religious identity are so deeply felt, how do societies best manage that difficult task? Protecting vulnerable groups from targeted abuse while also making sure that open discussion and criticism can still flourish. Something to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.